Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our sixth webinar in the TU Dublin Hothouse webinar series. We're delighted to have Andrew Marsh, who is the Senior Licensing Executive for TU Dublin Hothouse, and Tom Melia from Enterprise Ireland, who is the Senior Commercialisation Specialist. So Andrew's going to open us up and he's going to have a discussion about the Comms Fund and how we support staff and students to do that. And Tom's going to come in and talk about the actual Commercialisation Fund itself. We have case study examples, and we have Brian O'Brien from Opoplan will be discussing his journey on the Commercialisation Fund. So I'll just hand you over to Andrew and we'll welcome the other participants throughout the session. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Danielle. Welcome everyone, good afternoon. So I think Danielle just can give you a quick overview of the agenda. So we'll start. I'm just going to give some very quick introductions on Hothouse and the talk today, and then Tom Melia is going to talk about the Commercialisation Fund, the details, and we'll talk about some examples then, and specifically what supports TU Dublin can offer, and then we'll have lots of questions at the end, hopefully. Okay, so I'm going to give a brief overview about TU Dublin Hothouse for those of you who don't know who we are. Researchers and staff, both within the TU Dublin City campus, but also Blanchardstown and Tala, and across the DRIC consortium, which includes Dún Laoghaire Institute of Art and Design and the Dublin Institute for Advanced Studies. In the context of today, what we try to do is we try to create startups from the research that's done, and that's what the Commercialisation Fund is a vehicle for. We can see here the team. It's led by Paul McGuire, who's the head of innovation and enterprise. There are 3 licensing executives, myself, Kieran and Dave. Shauna leads up the business development. We've Danielle, who's our marketing manager, and Marie is administrator, and Bernadette runs the incubator, which is our entrepreneur supports. As I mentioned, we have our partnership. We lead a technology and knowledge transfer consortium with the Dublin Institute for Advanced Studies, National College of Ireland and IADT. We're, quick slide here on our impact. We're very proud of the impact that we have, and the reason that our offices are funded in the universities is to drive impact from the research that's done. So the sort of thing we're interested in is creating high-tech jobs, launching new products, and getting building out companies that can scale and get investment. And this is again what we are very interested in.
Sorry, Andrew, I just want to interrupt you there. Your slides are not actually moving. They're still on the main slide.
My apologies. Okay.
Just before you go any further.
Oh, okay. So we should, okay. Is that working now?
It is, yes. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. So there's the Hothouse team, Rick, and then our impact. We have a lot of different stakeholders. We provide services for industry, researchers, students, and startups who aren't even necessarily associated with the university. I think that the audience here today is researchers and staff, so I'm just going to talk briefly about what we can do for researchers. We can assist you with commercializing IP and protecting the IP, and also licensing out IP. So we help you to drive impact, in particular commercial impact, from the research that you do. Okay, so I'm going to go back a slide there. So I'm just going to hand you over now to Tom Melia, who's going to give an overview of the Commercialisation Fund program. The Commercialisation Fund program is designed to help researchers in universities to create spin-outs and to commercialise their research. I'm just going to stop sharing so that Tom can share his
Hi, everyone.
Now, stop sharing.
Hi everyone, I hope you can see that. That's coming through, is it okay?
Yeah, I'm seeing that there, Tom.
So, hi everyone. My name is Thomas Melia. I'm part of the Research and Innovation Division of Enterprise Ireland. So, my own background, I am an electronics engineer by trade, and over the years I've worked in signal processing and algorithm development and IoT and transceiver design. And I guess in more recent years, I've come more into the product support and development side of things. So I have this kind of mixed technical commercial background, and past 3 years I've been at Enterprise Ireland helping startups come out of universities and kind of building the business model in both the commercial and the technical sides. I'm just going to move the slide on. Can everyone see the next slide there? It's advancing okay, is it? Okay, so I thought it might be useful just to let you know who are Enterprise Ireland. We are a government agency, and we have we've tasked with job creation and growing Irish companies. Now you might ask, like, aren't there loads of agencies that do that? And yes, you're right, there are. There's IDA, there's SFI, local enterprise offices. So there are lots of agencies, and it can get a little bit confusing. So the way I like to understand it is I have a lovely algorithm, or a lovely equation I look at. This is this equation for macroeconomics economists. It describes the GDP of a country. So that's the net total amount of finished goods and services produced in a country or an economy. So in Ireland, we have dedicated state agencies that drive each part of this. It's kind of like an engine. And we have dedicated different agencies within Ireland to do the different parts of it. So at a local level, you have local enterprise offices, and they drive all the local kind of businesses and get them up and running. A very kind of famous agency in Ireland is IDA, been around since the 50s, and their job is to bring foreign direct investment into the country. So that's all those green parts of the equation. You want to maximise them as much as possible. So they bring in investment from outside. So that brings capital into the country. In terms of government spend, there's several agencies to do this. Probably most relevant to us is SFI. So they have a remit to take government money and put it out into the economy in terms of science and engineering. And I guess especially into what you guys do. And then Enterprise Ireland, we're actually more about trade, believe it or not. We have a funny name. We're called Enterprise Ireland. It should be actually Export Ireland, because our remit really is to maximise the amount of exports going out of the country. So we want to always increase what's known as the trade balance, and that's the amount of exports versus the amount of imports. Ireland was quite a poor country back in the 60s and 70s, and we would always have run like negative trade balances. So we'd always be importing in more goods. And joining the EU and various other developments over the years, we've been able to turn that around. And in the last decade or so, Ireland generally exports 20 to 30% more goods out of the country than we take in. And that's driven by startups a lot of the time in recent decades. So you would have about 20,000 new jobs each year created in this space. And just to give you an idea of what that kind of trade balance looks like compared to other Western economies, you'd be like in the UK or the US, they'd be running maybe 2% trade balances if they're lucky. It's often negative. So we're actually unusual as a Western economy to be able to do this, and that's our job. We drive that. Startups are a big part of what we do. It's a big part of our strategy. In the last 10 years, in Dublin in particular, it starts to become kind of one large startup incubator. You go around the Silken Docks and in surrounding areas, you see there's just startups popping up all the time. Generally, there's 20,000 new jobs being created per year in this space, and that's different from previous decades. We would have had periods of growth, such as the Celtic Tiger period in the early 2000s. It was driven by a lot of, I guess, software development in the dot-com boom. Then you would have had a construction boom, and then some of the large kind of another tech boom came in with Google and Facebook and all the other many multinationals coming in. But actually, in recent years, startups have been a kind of main driver, and those startups are small little groups like yourselves who have an idea and have been able to turn it into something. So it's it kind of makes us a bit more resilient to big shocks globally. Like if some of the big companies pull out of the country, it doesn't have the same effect. Like when Dell pulled out of Limerick a few years ago, that really crippled Limerick. It probably wouldn't have the same effect now because we're just a bit more resilient. We have a lot more companies in the space doing a lot more things. Just in terms of what startup funding looks like. So you're on this call, you're interested in startup funding. We typically would fund 150 to 200 different startups every year. We have two vehicles usually for this: high potential startup fund and competitive startup fund. These are highly sought after grants, and usually they'll be a door opener for much larger investments. Then moving on to another set of grants that we can give out that are less well known are the commercialization grants. So that's kind of our focus today. These are funds especially designed for third level entrepreneurs such as yourselves, and they're only accessible by third level entrepreneurs. They're much lower risk. We don't seek equity with any of these grants as you would with other investments, and the supports provided by the university are kind of a hidden benefit. You'll have access to all the different legal supports, academic supports that are in the university that a typical startup won't have access to. So there's quite a lot to be said for these grants. I think generally we invest heavily in startups. So it's, like I said, it's a big part of our strategy. Compared to other economies, we tend to put a lot of effort into getting startups up and running. And depending on the different global rankings, you'll often see Enterprise Ireland right up there at the top in terms of number of seed investment made. So PitchBook would be one of these kind of groups that does these rankings, and they would often have us ranked up one or first or second in terms of actual number of investments. And you'll see other organizations such as 500 Startups, they'll be up there as well, and Y Combinator less so. So yeah, very much part of what we do is get startups up and running. There are a lot of grants and awards out there, and it can be quite confusing. Quite confusing to me. So it's for you guys, you'd be wondering what ones do you have the best shot at, and when should you go after each one of them, or what's appropriate, I guess. So I'll try with this slide to give you some idea of what's out there and what's appropriate for you guys. So most of you, I would imagine, are at a kind of an idea stage, or you're possibly at a kind of minimum viable product stage. That kind of would usually put you in what's known as a pre-seed category. So your typical investors there could be friends and family, it could be accelerators such as the ones you have in TU Dublin. Beyond that, you will have what is known as seed investment. So that's a term you've probably heard before, and that's appropriate when you're starting to trade and you're starting to build up your company. So you'll see a lot of angels will come in at that time. VC will start to become very interested in you at that time, and then beyond that, there is additional kicks of investment, Series A, Series B. You might hear that terminology and we kind of wonder, what do you mean by Series A, Series B? It just means they're follow-on rounds, and often the VC that invested at seed level will follow their investment on with a Series A, B, etc., etc. Or other people might come in on the investment. But for you guys, generally speaking, you're at pre-seed level. You're in third level. You have a nice idea of an algorithm seems to be working, or you have a particular process that you want to get out there. So pre-seed is where you should be looking. So in purple writing there, I don't know if that comes up as purple, but they're the traditional people that startups would go looking for money. And in parallel, I have the Enterprise Ireland kind of parallel funds. So you can pick and choose what you want from this. If you find that, listen, we have a VC interested and they're going to give us all the money we want, that's brilliant. You don't need our help. But if you do find that you just need that extra bit of help, we have a series of grants that will help. Some of these you'll notice are commercialization fund based, and some are the kind of startup, high potential startup fund based. So that's roughly where they sit in terms of when you should approach them and what they're appropriate for. Generally speaking, most people I speak to in TU Dublin or Trinity or wherever else, the first support we will kind of offer them is the feasibility grant, so the commercialization feasibility grant. And what this is, it's for people who have an idea but they need help to explore it. So they might be getting very good results in the lab. That maybe you've kind of finished out your thesis, your PhD thesis or whatever else, and there's a kind of a logical next step where you might want to get the idea out to a large audience. So, but listen, you've never done this before and you'd like a bit of help doing it. And that's what this grant is for. It will give you access to a grant of anywhere from 10,000 to about 15,000 generally, and it allows you to hire in expertise that you don't have ready access to. So it could be an expert in a particular market area you want to go after. And that resource will then go out and knock on all the doors that you don't even know about, but also the ones you don't even know about. So it can be quite a time-consuming process, and it can be difficult to get in on, especially if you haven't been used to doing this before. So you can get someone to bring you along on this journey and ramp up your skills in this level, but also do a lot of it for you. And fundamentally, this grant will let you know if you have a business model that's actually works or not. And what I mean by that is, can we figure out, are there a bunch of people with a specific problem that your solution addresses? And going just beyond that, is there enough of them that will actually pay for the product or service and bring in enough money to pay for a team of developers and everyone else? So if you can make that work, that means you have a business model working. And listen, we're trying to figure out a kind of back of an envelope situation, whether there's a business model or not at this point in time. So if everything goes well in the feasibility grant, you're getting a bit of traction from your kind of target users. Then you can go after the grant you really want. The grant you really want is the Commercialisation Fund. So this can be small, it can be 40k, or it could be large. It can be 350k, 400k, depending on what you need to do. And it can run for 3 months, it can run for 24 months. You could have 2 or 3 of them in sequential order, depending on how you want to split it up. And fundamentally, it's pre-seed money for you guys to build up your founding team. So maybe there's 2 of you now and you have an idea, but you need to hire in expert 3 and expert 4, or team member 3 or 4. This grant will allow you to hire them in and start working together and kind of bring in a team together, around the idea. It allows you to build commercial traction, and what I mean by that is it allows you to get out there with your prototype and actually start testing it with users, and getting actual data on whether what you're doing works or not. Maybe you're going to iterate through the project. You'll have 4 or 5 iterations with a bunch of commercial users. And generally, if people generally want access to what you're doing, they will come on board as a trial partner fairly easily. And third, just point there, it allows you to build and validate your technology. It allows you to build that prototype, basically. So you might have been able to bring together some prototype in the lab on a bench level, but now maybe you want to get it to a more scalable state. So it's something that you could give to someone and you wouldn't have to handhold them through the process. They could go off and just kind of test it for several months and give you back the feedback afterwards. So that's what the Commercialisation Fund will allow you to do. And listen, we're very flexible on what you use the grant for. You might have people that have a medical device and they need to investigate all the regulatory stuff and build out their kind of quality management system for when they spin out. That's valid too, You might find that you need to do a lot of travels overseas in normal times, I guess, and attend trade shows and really ratchet up the interest in what you're doing. That's valid too, If it all makes sense in terms of building out your business model, then we can accommodate it. So that's Commercialisation Fund. That's the main grant. There are other supports out there as well, and I've mentioned some of them already. Ones that I haven't mentioned, you could look at what the University Bridge Fund. Now, this was started off by Trinity and UCD, but it's available to you guys as well. They will invest at a very early stage in third level spinouts. Generally, their terms have been 100k for 10% equity, and they will have kind of first refusal on IP as part of that investment. So you'll see people will access that after the Commercialisation Fund often. So it can be quite a useful first investment, first kind of non-grant investment, you know. New Frontiers, you guys will be very familiar with it in TU Dublin. So that's, I'm not sure if I have the figures right here, I'll be corrected no doubt if I'm wrong, but it's 15k scholarship and it involves training, incubation space, no equity or IP impact. It can be a very good place to bring your team together and work on something there. And I've had projects come out of New Frontiers and come into Commercialisation Fund, kind of maybe backtrack a little bit, and that can work as well, you know. So if you see a call coming up for New Frontiers and you think, listen, let's have a go at it, it's not a bad idea, you know. You won't shut out yourself from other grants by going for that. I thought it might be interesting just to look at a couple of different startups I'm working with at the minute and where they are. Some are more advanced than others, but I kind of picked them out because I thought that they're not all what you might expect. Traditional academic spin out appears on the scene and we give it a grant and away we go. They're all a little bit different and quirky, and maybe you will see something in each of them, or one or two of them. So the first one, probably fairly traditional one, Vertigenius. So they are developing what's known as vestibular rehabilitation platform, and that's specifically targeting people with vertigo or dizziness conditions. So traditionally, this is a kind of a 90-hour physiotherapy protocol that you're supposed to carry out yourself at home. Very difficult to do. So the promoter in this case had the idea of developing a piece of software and hardware that would allow people to do it accurately at home. So it's quite a trend now at the moment to put physiotherapy remotely into people's homes. But this specific kind of therapy wasn't really being addressed. So that was the idea. Initially, Dara, the promoter, she would have applied into Commercialisation Fund, but probably not as much knowledge on the commercial side as she does now, and she was kind of knocked back and asked to maybe take a look at it again. And what she did, she went into a program the NDRC were running at the time, a pre-commercial boot camp that they run every spring, and that allowed them to gather in lots of evidence from the market, and it kind of changed some of their approaches, and they were able to get a Commercialisation Fund project funded off the back of that in 2019. It was an interesting time for them this year with the coronavirus pandemic. It had been difficult enough for a lot of digital health ideas to get traction with people, because people never really believed that remote healthcare was really going to happen in the way some of the promoters believed it should. That whole attitude kind of disappeared overnight, and this project they were overnight were brought into Beaumont and the Mater and different hospitals and started running remote clinics with their prototype software, and they were able to, I guess, really find a silver lining in all of this. And you'll notice several companies, especially with remote offerings, have done well in this time because they suddenly became the thing that was needed. Dara's now doing very well with both our software and our hardware, and we were able to give her a second comp fund, approved it. It's just approved now, and that will go live next year and will allow her to build out the medical device regulatory aspects. So everything going well, she's looking to spin out in spring next year, depending on the new medical device regulations coming in. It may be spring or maybe autumn. So she has a plan A and a plan B. We'd expect Dara to go into our high potential startup unit then in 2022 off the back of that. So that's a kind of traditional approach. The next one, Size. Size is an AI-powered tailoring engine coming out of Trinity. So the promoter here is not an academic at all. Actually, Owen was a third-year student when I met him in 2017. Doesn't have a technical background. He just had an idea, and he got himself onto a student accelerator in Trinity known as Launchbox, and that's where I saw him pitching one day, and I said, listen, you need to build an AI engine. Do you want to team up with someone who can do that for you, and we can put a grant around you? So I would have brought him into the Adapt Centre in Trinity, and Adapt is in TU Dublin as well, I know, but they were able to kind of find people in the Adapt Centre that knew how to build a particular machine vision engine the guys needed. They essentially wanted to be able to take smartphone photos and then convert that into centimetre accurate sizing measurements for tailoring especially in online retail. That Commercialisation Fund, they applied for that in 2019 and are up and running at the moment. They're doing very well. The engine seems to be working. They're building plugins into Shopify e-commerce platforms at the moment, and we'd expect those guys to come out as a high potential startup late next year. So this wasn't your traditional, we have an algorithm in a lab, let's get an extra grant. This was an idea, a student-led idea that we were able to bring into the research system. And once it's in the research system, it's eligible for the Commercialisation Fund. Another one in my stable is Way2Be. They're building a navigation tool for people with intellectual disabilities. So they come out of an iterative design group in Trinity, and they, after many iterations, they arrived at this very discreet wrist wearable solution that someone could use to get from A to B, from their home to their work, without being vulnerable and without needing someone to go with them. So it's universally designed, and they were able to garner a lot of attention. They got a James Dyson Award in 2017 when I was first talking to them, and they had enough traction to secure a Commercialisation Fund project in 2018. A lot of interest in the UK for the solution. There would be a lot of dedicated programs in different councils over there, and there's been a lot of active trials running with the solution since then. So you'll see they have quite a media presence if you ever look them up, and quite a lot of nice stories there. They secured a competitive start fund this year, and we'd expect them to secure additional investment in the next few years. Difficult time for them. Nobody's walking around going to places of work at the moment. So opposite problem from all the digital health guys. This solution is very much for a non-COVID world. So we would hope that Way2Be would be able to get back up and running, I guess, in the next year or so. But listen, they're working away. They have a competitive start fund now, and we expect investment to come in soon. Another project, not coming out of a lab. This was another student-led idea. This really came out of Trinity Harriers Athletics Club. So chap there, Adam Gaggerty, he's a track athlete. He's not an engineer or anything, but he was looking for some sort of muscle monitoring device that he could put on his hamstring, and just trying to monitor. He had a recurring hamstring injury that would keep coming back. And it's a notorious problem for kind of elite athletes, that you think you're okay, but you're not. And then you go out running and you pull it again. There was no actual devices on the market that Adam could use to do this. And he approached the guys in the Trinity Human Performance Lab. So there's a research group in Trinity there that look at all of this. And they were able to kind of start working together and develop a first prototype last year, and it was kind of a lab-based prototype. You would put it on the leg, it would measure the muscle performance. But what they really wanted to do was get something you could put on your leg and it would work out on the track. It wouldn't fall off. You would get accurate measurement and it would feel comfortable. So that was an idea that Adam started to realize that there was a commercial opportunity there, and they approached us and got a feasibility study early this year, and got a lot of traction actually from elite sports in Ireland, but also abroad, even as far as Australia. There was people engaged with this idea. and we were able to fund that this year, and they'll be up and running now in January. It's a two-stage project. They had the idea of splitting up into 2 stages. So stage 1 will be a proof of concept running for 12 months, and everything going well, if we show that it works and people want to wear it, we'll move on then to stage 2, where it's business development and medical device kind of regulatory support. So we'll be looking in 2023 to have an injury sense high potential startup coming out the door. So it's a quite a interesting space. A lot of third level startups coming out in this space. Yeah, so last one, I know I'm kind of hammering the point a little bit here. Last one is Calibre. So they're building an AI editorial system. What it will do is detect defamation and toxic content in draft newspaper articles. So 20 years ago, 10 years ago, newspaper rooms would have dedicated teams of sub-editors that would look at every article that was produced to make sure there wasn't any toxic content or any libel sentences in there that would get the paper into trouble. So what they're basically building an AI engine that will be able to parse all this content and report back. It's similar to what Grammarly does for grammar, obviously. Now this, again, not an academic team. This is a pair of journalists, Connor and Neil Brady, so father and son. Neil Brady is the son, and he's coming out of The Guardian and Storyful and various places like that. Connor Brady would have run the Irish Times from the early 90s to around year 2000. So a lot of knowledge there on what the industry needs. They're not AI people at all, so they didn't know how to do this. So they went into the Adapt Centre again. Engaged on what's known as an innovation voucher. So these are very small 5K vouchers that companies can access third level expertise with. They kind of realized at that point that there was potential larger collaboration, and they approached us then to do a Commercialisation Fund, and they were successful last year in getting that award, and the project is now coming towards an end. They're securing an investment at the moment, and we'd expect these guys to enter the high potential startup unit this year. So again, not your traditional, we're converting a thesis into a company. This is somebody from outside spinning into the college and then spinning back out again. So that can work quite well. So yeah, I know probably one example too many, but generally what I'm trying to say is your idea matched with money that we have can often lead to success. So we've lots of success stories out there, and if you like the sounds of any of those stories, I'm happy to go a little bit deeper with you on them. My last slide, I'll put up the 6 supports again there. Probably most important though is my contact email address down the bottom. If you're having trouble getting through to me, or you can go to Andrew or anyone in the TTO office. Happy to do it either way. Always available for a meeting. Not face to face, unfortunately, at the moment. But listen, you can 30 minutes at any stage. We can schedule it and we can talk through the idea. There's no bad ideas, right? We're happy to talk about any of these ways we can support you, or just talk through the business model. You know, maybe this is all new and you just need someone to talk to about it. That's fine too, you know. So I'm happy to take questions there, Andrew. Well, I'm not sure if there's any popping up there yet. Or
thanks, Tom. I think we'll probably do the questions at the end via the slide. So thanks a million, Tom.
Okay.
If you can stop sharing, and I will add that in my slides. Thanks a million, Tom. Particularly those examples, they're a good to kind of show the variety of what's happening with the Fund.
Yeah, so unfortunately they're all Trinity examples, but that's mainly because I'm new enough to TU Dublin. But listen, I have big bags of money sitting on the table for you here.
That's great. I'm just going to just briefly talk about 2 TU Dublin examples. we'd hoped to have Brian O'Brien here himself, but we're having the inevitable technical difficulties with the webinars. So I'm just going to very briefly talk about Brian's project. So Brian has he was a lecturer in the Dublin School of Architecture down there in Linen Hall, down near Bolton Street. And Brian was also a practicing architect. And Brian had the idea that you could use an online platform and automation and building information modeling to convert an architect's brief into a house design for people in a sort of automated or semi-automated fashion. And so Brian was very keen to turn this idea into a business and came to us and went to Enterprise Ireland to looking for funding through the Commercialisation Fund to build out a software platform. And I suppose the key thing for Brian is that, you know, this was at that point, it was an idea. And it's very, very difficult to get private equity investments at that stage. You know, you just have an idea, no matter how good you think the idea is. And so the Enterprise Ireland is, you know, it's a higher risk funding. You're more likely to get the funding through Enterprise Ireland and incubate the idea within the university. So Brian did this extremely well and worked very, very closely with the Gerard Land, who was a commercialization specialist who we worked with before Tom, in various iterations of the application. It was invited in the end, and it was very, very successful. Commercialisation Fund. A spin-out was created, and since the spin-out was created, Open Plan has got investment through the NDRC program, and it's up and running now, and is moving to the HPSU phase. So just a good example, again, in the ICT space, and an ongoing project then I'll just talk about briefly in the manufacturing space is Heel Road. We have a researcher called Amir who is about halfway through a commercialization fund, and this is probably the more traditional type of com fund. This is came out of Amir's research on self-healing asphalt. So Amir had been involved in various EU projects, and they developed out this self-healing asphalt technology. And you can see this picture isn't necessarily from his technology, but it kind of gives an example. You embed within the asphalt little capsules, and then you can run over them with an induction machine like in the picture, which will sort of melt the capsules and will heal the asphalt. And so Amir is in the middle of a compound on this. When Amir has talked about this in the past, he gives these he gives this timeline, which I think is a reasonable example. In fact, I think this is probably one of the fastest that we've got through to ComFund. But just if you are thinking of approaching us to do a commercialization fund, just sort of keep this sort of timeline in mind. It takes quite a while. There's a lot of commercial work. I'll talk about this very briefly in a minute. But there's an awful lot of commercial and market discovery that needs to be done prior to a ComFund. No matter how good your technology is, no matter how well developed the technology is, it's going to take months and months of commercial work to try and get this ready for evaluation. So, Amir came to us in 2018, talked to Hothouse and Barry Fennell in Enterprise Ireland, and spent 3 or 4 months pretty much full-time drafting this application, submitted in the open call, and it was awarded. And then typically from award to getting your project up and running, by the time we get contracts and people hired and all that, it can be up to 6 months. So just kind of keep that timeline in mind. And this is a good example of a point I really want to make about the Commercialisation Fund. It is, to my mind, the best source of early stage funding you can get for commercial research. I mean, you can get 2, 3, I've seen 400K plus for these projects. And it is fantastic if you really, really have the ambition to commercialize your research, in particularly to commercialize it via a startup. And if you're just looking for research funding, I think it's not a great source of just pure research funding to advance research. It's not really the intention of the program, and you will spend a lot of time as PI on commercial related activities. So, if that's not something that you're interested in, you're not going to enjoy doing the Commercialisation Fund. But I'm just going to finish up by talking about what are the Hothouse Supports. So no matter where you are in TU Dublin or in any of our direct partners, the Hothouse team will be able to support you on the Commercialisation Fund application stage and post-award. So what we typically do with people who are pre-application or thinking of doing an application, we can help you a little bit with the initial customer discovery. We can help you design sort of semi-structured questionnaires to go and talk to people. We can help you with things like these commercial tools like the business model canvas, problem canvas, develop out your value proposition. And this can often be a precursor then to the full comp fund feasibility that Tom mentioned. So the full comp fund feasibility, then at that stage, we would bring in a consultant who can really do a market deep dive for you. And at that pre-application stage, we can look at the IP that you've developed to date. What's the best strategy for capturing it? What's the best way to protect it? At the application stage, we'll help you with the application. We review it. We can help refine your IP and business strategy. And what's really, really important to Enterprise Ireland in these applications is that there is a compelling team. So they want to see a really committed PI who's going to drive this, but they want to see commercial people, they want to see technical people on the team, and we can, use our networks and our contacts and our advice to try and help you build out that team. During the actual comp fund itself, we'll be engaged with you on capturing the IP that comes out of the comp fund. Again, continuing to help you build your team. Often in these comp funds, we will hire people who we hope will join the spin out at the end. We can give you advice, and then increasingly we're seeing during the comp funds, we want the team to meet investors like Atlantic Bridge and so on to sort of get them on the radar for when they spin out. And then after the comp fund, we'll help you with the company formation, the licensing out of the IP to the company, and then if it's applicable through our New Frontiers program and other programs, we have entrepreneur training and incubation. So we're there if you are committed to doing this, particularly as a spin out. We are there to help you throughout the journey. So before I finish up, I just some shameless advertising. So our next webinar is myself. I'm going to give a sort of a general introduction to IP. We've had this request from various lecturers, from students, and from staff. So it's going to be. I'm going to talk a little bit about TU Dublin's IP policy, and then a general chat on IP from sort of a practitioner's experience. And that'll be on the 24th of November at 11. So you can register for that with Danielle. And next week is Global Entrepreneurship Week, hashtag GEW 2020, and there will be TU Dublin Hothouse activities all week. You can book a one-to-one session with anyone on the team to discuss more about startup supports, mentoring. I mean, we're always available for one-to-one sessions, but we're really just trying to push this out and advertise it and see if people come to us next week during Global Entrepreneurship Week. There'll be a video series with our various funders, including EI. We're going to have some case studies on the website. We're going to have a learning lunch on Wednesday with the Dublin City Council, a local enterprise office, launch of New Frontiers Phase 2, and lots more. So details on the Hothouse website and our usual social channels, LinkedIn and Twitter for that. Okay, well, I think that's all we have. Thank you very much to everyone for attending. And I'll just see if there are any questions.